The moment Adrian Keller saw the messages on his wife's phone, he didn't feel anger. Not the explosive kind anyway. What he felt instead was something colder, something far more dangerous. Clarity. The photos were not ambiguous. The conversations are even less so. Plans, inside jokes, private references only two people who shared intimacy would understand. And then one line that refused to leave his head. One more night before you fly back to him. Back to him. Back to 14 years of marriage reduced to a logistical inconvenience. Adrian didn't move for almost a full minute. His breathing stayed steady. His pulse barely changed. Years of engineering high-risk structures had trained him for moments like this. When something critical fails, panic gets people killed. Precision keeps them alive. He began taking screenshots, systematically, methodically, like documenting structural damage after a collapse. When he finished, he placed the phone back exactly where he had found it on the bedside table, aligning it to the same angle against the lamp base. She wouldn't be back from Seattle for another 4 days. 4 days was more than enough. Some men would have called immediately. Some would have screamed. Some would have demanded explanations they weren't ready to hear. Adrian considered those reactions emotional leaks, and leaks weakened the position. His response would be different. His name was Adrian Keller. At 39, he had built a reputation as someone corporations trusted when projects couldn't afford mistakes. A structural risk consultant. Many companies called when a design might fail under pressure. Ironically, he had missed the structural failure inside his own marriage. His wife, Marissa, worked as a documentary field producer. Smart, driven, curious about everything. The kind of person who made strangers open up within minutes. They met 12 years earlier when Adrian had been assessing safety violations at an abandoned factory scheduled for redevelopment. She had been there filming a piece on urban renewal. She had crossed a safety barrier to get a better shot. He had pulled her back seconds before loose concrete crashed where she had been standing. Later, she joked he had saved her life. He said she had simply ignored physics. 3 months later, they were dating. 2 years later, they were married. For a long time, they worked. Not dramatically, not passionately, but reliably. Like good infrastructure. He advanced in his consulting firm. She built a solid reputation producing long-form documentary pieces. They traveled when schedules aligned. Weekend kayaking trips, small restaurants, quiet routines. They talked about children in abstract future terms. Someday, when things slowed down, things never did. 2 years ago, she began working with an independent media collective producing international environmental projects. At first, the travel seemed manageable. 8 days in Iceland, 10 days in Chile. Assignments with clear start and end points. She always came back energized, reconnected, present. Then the timeline started stretching. 3 weeks in Argentina, a month following a marine research vessel. Deadlines became flexible, return dates uncertain. You can't schedule real stories, she would say. You wait for moments. Adrian understood timing. Timing decided whether a bridge held or failed. So he adjusted, focused on his own projects, built routines that didn't depend on her presence. Then came the Boston redevelopment series, a 9-month urban transformation project requiring constant travel. That was when Daniel Harper entered the story. He's the lead writer on the project, she mentioned casually one evening. Adrian noticed the way her tone changed when she said his name. Not obvious, just slightly brighter. Most people would have missed it. Adrian specialized in noticing small shifts. He's brilliant with narrative structure, she added later. Think visually, Daniel said. Daniel suggested. Daniel recommended. The name appeared more and more often. Adrian said nothing. Observation always came before action, even when she began stepping into other rooms for calls, even when physical intimacy became something scheduled between flights, even when she came home carrying an energy that didn't quite belong to their life together. He said nothing, until the notification preview appeared at 1:47 in the morning. Still thinking about last night. That was when the structure finally failed inspection. He lay awake beside her that night, studying the face he had trusted for over a decade, and realized something unsettling. He didn't actually know who she was anymore. Morning came like any other. Coffee, routine conversation, airport timing. She kissed him goodbye. Love you. Automatic. Safe flight, he answered, already planning his disappearance. Once her flight showed airborne, he began. Not emotionally, operationally. He transferred exactly 40% of their shared liquid savings, enough to restart, not enough to trigger immediate legal escalation. Packed one medium travel bag, essential documents, minimal clothing, tools. He called his firm and cited an indefinite personal leave. Then he called his cousin Mark, a paramedic he trusted more than anyone. "Going offline for a while," Adrian said. "You safe?" "Yes." "You running from something?" "Walking away from something." Mark didn't ask more. "Call once a month so I know you're alive." "I will." Then Adrian drove north without choosing a final destination. Just distance. Distance stripped things down. 10 months of isolation has a way of removing whatever people use to define themselves. Titles disappear, social roles fade, noise dies. What remains is who you actually are. His truck finally forced a stop in Traverse City after a transmission failure drained most of his remaining cash. Temporary decisions became permanent ones. He found work first in a hardware supply warehouse, then later at a wilderness skills training center catering to professionals looking to disconnect from corporate burnout. The owner, Elena Brooks, hired him after watching him improvise a water filtration system during a demonstration. "You understand systems," she said simply. "I understand failure points," he replied. She liked that answer. Elena was confident, direct, late 30s, the type who evaluated people quickly and accurately. She flirted occasionally but respected the distance he maintained. "Someone did serious damage," she told him once after he declined a drink invitation. "That obvious? You have the posture of someone who survived impact but is still checking for internal bleeding." He almost smiled. "No timeline on recovery," she added. "Just don't pretend you're fine before you are." Time wasn't his problem. He had nothing but time. He built a routine like armor. Wake before sunrise, manual labor, strength training, minimal conversation. He grew a beard, lost the softness office life had built, gained the physical density of someone using his body daily again, started writing at night. Not about her. About control. About removal instead of destruction. About the tactical advantage of silence. About how absence could be stronger than confrontation. He cut all digital presence. No social media, no searching her name, no curiosity allowed. Clean separation was the only real exit. He bought a prepaid phone and gave the number only to Mark. "She hired someone to find you," Mark mentioned during one monthly check-in. "Expected. She showed up at my place once, crying. Said you vanished." Adrian said nothing. "What should I tell her? That I'm alive. That's it? That's all she needs." Mark paused. "Are you coming back someday?" Adrian looked at the frozen lake outside the cabin window. No. There was nothing to return to. What he didn't admit was something unexpected. He wasn't miserable. For the first time in years, his life belonged only to him. Clients at the center ranged from exhausted executives to serious outdoorsmen. Adrian developed a quiet reputation, competent, controlled, unshakable. A few women showed interest. He declined without explanation. He wasn't ready to build anything new. He was still understanding what had collapsed. Winter arrived early that year. Tourist flow dropped. Days shortened. Silence deepened. And he had almost made peace with it. Until the afternoon of December 22nd, the day she found him. Adrian had imagined many scenarios where his past might catch up to him. This was not one of them. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind that usually passed without memory. He was helping a couple from Wisconsin sign liability forms for a winter navigation course when the main door opened and a wave of frozen air rolled inside. He didn't look up immediately. He finished explaining the emergency beacon procedure first. Control before reaction. Then he lifted his eyes. And time did something strange. Marissa stood just inside the doorway, snow melting along the shoulders of a charcoal coat he had never seen before. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Structurally, like something inside her had collapsed and never been rebuilt. Her hair was shorter, her face sharper. Her confidence, the thing he used to recognize first, was gone. She held a small roller suitcase like someone unsure how long they would be allowed to stay. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The couple behind her stepped aside politely, sensing something unspoken moving through the air. When they finally left, she stepped forward. "Do you have availability?" she asked quietly. No drama, no tears, no accusations, just logistics. Adrian studied her for exactly 2 seconds before turning to the computer. "If you're booking, I need ID." His voice sounded like someone else's, professional, neutral. She handed it over without argument. He entered her information without comment, processed the payment, and slid a key across the counter. "Unit 6, Trailside, breakfast at 6:30. No emotion leaked into the words. "Thank you," she said. Her fingers brushed his for less than a second. It felt like touching a live wire. "You look different," she added carefully. He gave a short nod toward the path outside. Direction instead of conversation. She understood, and left. He held himself together for exactly 40 seconds after the door closed. Then his body reacted. Not emotionally, physically. His stomach turned with violent precision, like rejecting contaminated food. He stepped into the staff washroom and gripped the sink until the wave passed. Cold water, controlled breathing, recalibration. Elena found him there. "The woman who just checked in," she said without hesitation. "That's history, isn't it?" Adrian nodded once. "Want me to move her out?" she asked. "We could say we're closing early." He considered it, for about 3 seconds. Then he shook his head. "I didn't come this far to start running again." Elena squeezed his shoulder once. "My office loft is open if you need space tonight." He appreciated that she didn't ask more. Sleep didn't come that night. Adrian mapped possibilities instead. Distance between buildings, possible intentions, entry points into his life he had sealed. How she found him mattered. At 2:40 a.m., he walked out to the frozen shoreline. The lake had sealed itself into silent glass. Stars burned with the brutal clarity only winter allowed. He stood there until the cold simplified his thinking. By sunrise, he had decided. He would hear her, say what needed to be said, then move forward again, with or without whatever she had come to find. She was already in the dining hall when he arrived to start morning prep, hands wrapped around tea, watching him like someone studying a person they used to know. "You located me," he said, measuring coffee grounds with exact movements. "It took longer than I expected," she admitted. "You were thorough." Silence stretched. "The beard works," she said softly. "Why are you here?" No small talk, no transition, just impact. She inhaled slowly. "Not to ask you back." That surprised him slightly. Not to ask forgiveness either. That surprised him more. "You deserved better than that conversation." "You deserved better than betrayal," he corrected. She accepted that without defense. "Yes." That simple answer disarmed him more than excuses would have. "I'm here because you vanished," she continued. "I came home to an empty house, no explanation, no trace. For weeks I thought something terrible had happened. You know why I left." "I do now," she said. "I didn't then." A humorless breath escaped him. "I saw everything." She closed her eyes briefly. "I suspected that morning," she admitted. "My phone wasn't where I left it, but you acted completely normal." I was done reacting. Guests began entering. Adrian lowered his voice. "Not here." He wiped his hands. "The storage cabin is empty after 3, if you're still here." She nodded. He spent the morning cutting fallen timber with almost surgical focus. Each swing burned excess thought out of his system. At exactly 3, she knocked once before entering. Always precise, he noticed. The cabin still smelled of varnish and cedar. He lit the small stove automatically. Hands needed work during difficult conversations. "How?" he asked. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "A vendor payment from your old consulting LLC," she said. "A small equipment order routed through a Michigan supplier. It took months, but eventually I found a region." He noted the vulnerability internally. "You could disappear again," she said quietly. "Yes." "Will you?" "Depends why you're here." She swallowed. "Why didn't you confront me?" He stared into the flame. "What would that change?" "You might have heard my side. I already knew your side." He met her eyes. "It wasn't an accident." "No." "It wasn't confusion." "No." "It was choice." "Yes." No excuses, no rewriting history, just truth. "How long?" 5 months. It landed like impact trauma. "Did you think you loved him?" "I told myself I did," she admitted. "It made it easier to justify." "And now?" Now I understand I was escaping myself. He almost dismissed it, but something in her tone stopped him. I'm not here to be pitied, she continued. I'm here because you should know what your silence did. He said nothing. He left 3 weeks after you disappeared, she said. Said the situation was damaged. Predictable. The production company dropped me. Conflict of interest. Also predictable. I lost most of my contracts within 6 months. Consequences. I sold the house. Necessary math. Therapy helped me understand something uncomfortable. He waited. You leaving without rage forced me to see myself without making you the villain. Snow began falling outside. Heavy. Quiet. I expected screaming, she said. Or revenge. Something that would let me blame you too. He said nothing. You gave me nothing to fight. Silence filled the space between them. Finally he spoke. I'm not the man who left Minneapolis. He watched the fire settle into coals. That version ended the night I saw those messages. And for the first time since she arrived, she seemed to understand she wasn't speaking to her husband anymore. She was speaking to what remained after him. I know I'm not the same either. Marissa said it quietly, like someone admitting something long overdue. Then she reached into her bag and placed a thick folded envelope on the table between them. I wrote it instead, she said. Things I couldn't say without interrupting myself. Adrian didn't touch it. What happened? Why did it happen? What came after? She pushed it slightly toward him. You can read it, or throw it away. He still didn't move. I'm leaving in 3 days, she added. After that, you never have to see me again if that's what you decide. She stood, paused. For whatever it's worth, she searched for the right words and seemed to reject several before choosing the simplest. I've never regretted anything more. Then she left. Adrian sat there long after the door closed. The envelope remained exactly where she left it. Late afternoon light shifted slowly across the wooden floor. He didn't open it. Not because he was afraid, because timing mattered. Some truths required the right mental conditions. Eventually, he picked it up and slipped it into his jacket. Unopened. The next day, he deliberately kept himself occupied. Led a full-day winter navigation course for a group of exhausted corporate attorneys trying to prove something to themselves. Responsibility helped. Physical strain helped more. By the time they returned after sunset, his thoughts had quieted enough to function again. Elena was waiting near the equipment shed holding 2 metal cups. Brought reinforcement, she said, handing him hot coffee cut with something stronger. She asked about you. Figured she would. I said you were working. Thank you. Elena studied him carefully. She looks like someone who fell from a very high place. She did. People change, Elena said. Usually after impact. She nodded slowly. You know what controlled burns do in forests? Adrian glanced at her. They destroy what can't survive, she continued. But they also make room for what they can. He didn't answer. Just saying, she added. Sometimes destruction isn't failure. That night, Adrian finally opened the letter. 7 pages. Her handwriting hadn't changed. That surprised him. The first page contained no excuses, only sequence. How a late production schedule had turned into long conversations. How professional admiration slowly became personal validation. How being seen in a new way became addictive. How she had separated her life into 2 realities she believed she could maintain indefinitely. Then consequences. The other man left the moment things became complicated. Professional fallout, lost contracts, friends choosing distance, her parents' quiet disappointment. But the final paragraph was the only part Adrian read twice. Your silence forced me to see myself without distraction. If you had fought me, I could have fought back. If you had screamed, I could have blamed you too. But you just left. And I had to live alone with exactly what I had done. He read that part again. Then once more. After finishing, he folded the pages carefully and placed them back into the envelope. Then he went outside and worked until his body demanded silence, chopping frozen wood beneath a hard winter moon, not to release anger, to process information. The following afternoon, he found her sitting alone behind the main building overlooking the frozen shoreline. She wore an oversized borrowed coat, hands buried deep in the sleeves, watching the horizon like someone waiting for something that wouldn't arrive. He evaluated the situation before approaching, then deliberately chose the chair beside hers. "I read it," she nodded. And nothing. A small, tired smile touched her face. "You were always efficient with words. Why come in person?" he asked. "Why not send it?" She looked at him directly. "Would you have opened it?" "No. That's why." Wind pushed snow across the deck in dry spirals. "I needed to see that you were real," she added. "Not just a rumor someone confirmed." "I'm not fine," he said honestly, "but I'm functional. You seem harder." Loss simplifies priorities. She watched him carefully. "You started writing again?" That surprised him. "You saw the notebook?" "You used to write stories before everything got busy." He hadn't thought about that in years. "Just organizing thoughts," he said. "You were good," she replied softly. "There are things worth restarting." He stood. "And things that aren't." She accepted the meaning. "Mark worries about you," she said. "He knows how to reach me." "He says the same about you." Adrian paused. "Maybe in spring." Not a promise, but not a wall either. That night, Adrian dreamed about fire. Not destruction. Controlled fire. Purposeful. Necessary. He woke with unusual clarity. Her last day arrived with a storm warning. By late morning, heavy snowfall began closing the region. By noon, the power grid failed under ice load. Backup generators activated automatically. Guests were advised to remain indoors. Adrian helped distribute emergency supplies when something registered wrong. Her vehicle was still there, but she wasn't. One of the maintenance staff spoke up. She mentioned wanting to see the ridge trail before leaving. Adrian felt his stomach tighten. The ridge trail ran almost 4 miles through dense forest. Beautiful, dangerous, especially in storm conditions. When? Early, maybe 5 hours. He was already moving. Elena caught his arm. "You can't go out in this." "I have to. Visibility is collapsing. I know the terrain. You could both disappear. I'll take the radio and locator." He was already layering thermal gear. "If I'm not back in 3 hours, call emergency services." Elena didn't argue again. She just helped him pack. "She still matters," she observed quietly. "She was my wife for over a decade." That was the only explanation he offered. Outside, the storm hit like an impact. Wind erased distance. Snow reduced visibility to meters. He moved by memory. Normal conditions, 2 hours. Storm conditions, unknown. Progress became slow and deliberate. At the second trail marker, he found the first sign. Not a scarf. A fresh disturbance where someone had slipped off a packed trail. His focus sharpened. He followed compressed snow patterns. Deviations. Mistakes people make when panic overrides direction. Another half-mile. Then he saw the tracks break toward a rock formation providing minimal wind protection. And then he saw her, curled against stone, partially covered by blowing snow. Face pale, movement slow, hypothermia progression. He moved fast. Thermal wrap, gloves check, breathing check. "Can you stand?" She tried. Failed. "Numb," she whispered. He lifted her without hesitation. She weighed less than he remembered. "Stay awake," he instructed. "Talk." "Stupid," she murmured. "Thought I had time." Storm winds swallowed most of the sound. He began the long return carrying both weight and history. Not because of love, because leaving someone to die was not something he could live with. Halfway back, the wind intensified, and for the first time he realized something uncomfortable. Saving her might change nothing, but not saving her would change him. And that decided everything. Less talking, stay awake. Adrian's voice had shifted into something purely functional as he forced his way back through the storm, carrying her weight against his chest. Every step required calculation. Wind direction, foot placement, energy conservation. "Why, did you come?" she managed through chattering teeth after what felt like an hour of slow movement. "You could have just let me disappear too." Adrian adjusted his grip slightly. "That's not who I am." It wasn't said emotionally, just fact. "That's why I loved you," she whispered weakly, "and probably why I still do." He didn't respond, not because he didn't hear, because survival required focus. When the lodge lights finally cut through the snow like distant signals, relief hit his muscles harder than exhaustion. 2 staff members and Elena rushed out immediately. They took her from his arms and moved fast toward heat and light. Adrian stayed near the entrance, suddenly aware his own strength had limits. He watched as they removed frozen layers, replaced them with blankets, and checked circulation. Her eyes found him briefly. Gratitude, regret, unfinished history. He stepped away first. Distance was still necessary. Elena found him later sitting alone in the kitchen, still wearing partially frozen gear, drinking coffee like someone returning from another reality. "She's stable," Elena said. "No tissue damage, early hypothermia only." "Good." She sat across from him. "That was either extremely brave or extremely reckless." "Calculated risk," he answered. "You knew what I meant." She studied him carefully. "You still care." "It's not that simple. It never is." She stood and touched his shoulder once. "She asked for you." Adrian sat alone for several minutes after she left. The storm outside matched the internal noise he refused to name. Eventually he stood and walked to the guest room where she had been placed. He knocked once. "Come in." Her voice sounded stronger. Color had returned to her face. Multiple blankets surrounded her. A hydration line ran into her arm. "Thank you," she said simply. "You would have done the same." They both knew that wasn't true. "What were you doing out there?" he asked. No anger, just assessment. "I wanted to see what your life looks like now," she admitted. "The place that replaced me." He absorbed that without comment. "Doctor says I will stay 2 more days," she added. "Travel isn't recommended." He nodded. "Do what you need." She hesitated. "Out there, I said something." "You were hypothermic," he said. "Cognitive distortion is normal." Her eyes held his. "That doesn't make it false." He didn't answer. "I still love you," she said quietly. "But that's not your problem anymore." He stood, distance again. "You should rest." "Wait," he paused. "There's something else." He didn't turn fully back. "He contacted me again last month." Adrian's expression didn't change. "The other man?" "Yes." "What did he want?" "Convenience," she said coldly. "His new relationship ended. Suddenly I became an option again." "And?" "I told him no." She met Adrian's eyes directly. For the first time I understood exactly what I had destroyed. Silence stretched. He said I was being dramatic. Something in Adrian hardened slightly. "I realized then I needed to find you," she continued. "Not to fix anything." She swallowed. "But to tell you that leaving was the only thing that could have made me understand." He nodded once. "Thank you for saying it. I'm not asking for another chance." "I know. I just needed you to know at least one of us finally understands the cost." He left shortly after, not abruptly, but definitely. The storm lasted 2 more days. During that time, they interacted only as 2 people with shared history and present distance. Polite, measured, contained. When the roads finally reopened, Adrian found her in the reception area settling her bill. Her suitcase stood ready. "I had your vehicle cleared," he said. "Road conditions are still unstable. Drive slowly through the ridge sections." "I will." Silence followed. "I suppose this is goodbye." "I suppose it is." Elena stepped away discreetly. "What now?" Adrian asked. "Back to Minneapolis," she answered. "Freelance assignments mostly, smaller work, but honest." She adjusted a new scarf. "What about you?" "For now, I stay." She studied his face like committing it to permanent memory. "If you ever want to talk, you know how." "I know." 12 years stood silently between them. Then Adrian made a decision. He reached into his coat and handed her a small, worn notebook. "My first journal." She looked surprised. "I can't take that." "I want you to." "Why?" "So you understand what silence looked like from my side." Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted it. "Thank you." Impulsively, she kissed his cheek. A familiar gesture from another life. He neither leaned in nor away. "Be well," she whispered. He watched her drive away until the road swallowed her completely. Elena joined him outside. "You okay?" "Closer than before." "She might come back someday." "Maybe." He turned toward the building. "But I won't be waiting." That night, Adrian started a new notebook. First entry. Today I closed a door without hatred. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just clarity. 2 weeks later, his phone rang from an unknown number. Mark. His voice sounded different. Adrian, are you sitting? Every muscle in Adrian's body tightened. What happened? It's Marissa. Silence. She was in a major collision outside Milwaukee. Multi-vehicle chain accident. Black ice. Adrian closed his eyes. Is she alive? Yes, but it's serious. Multiple surgeries. A pause. How did they get my number? Her sister tracked me down. Of course she did. She asked if you'd want to know. Adrian said nothing. She keeps asking about you, Mark added carefully. Images came without permission. Marissa laughing years ago. Marissa reading on their couch. Marissa driving away from the lodge. You going? Mark asked. I haven't decided. But even as he said it, Adrian was already calculating travel distance, flight routes, time windows. Emma called later that evening, her voice strained from exhaustion. I don't know if you'll come, she said, but she keeps asking if you know. Doctors were preparing the family for complications. Adrian asked only one question. Which hospital? St. Mary's Trauma Center. After the call, he walked to his cabin for hours. Two opposing instincts pulling equally hard. Protect the new life. Or finish the old story properly. Near midnight, he admitted something he couldn't ignore. Some chapters don't close on their own. And avoiding them doesn't mean they disappear. It just means they wait. By sunrise, Adrian had made his choice. Not because the decision felt easy, because delaying it would only turn it into something larger than it was. He booked a flight instead of driving. Faster, cleaner, less room for hesitation. Then he left Elena a brief note explaining his absence. Family emergency. Back soon. No elaboration. The flight south gave him too much time to think and just enough time to prepare. He would go, see her, say what needed to be said, and leave without letting the past reopen itself like an old wound pretending to be unfinished. That was the plan. Tight, controlled, temporary. Marissa's sister met him outside the trauma wing. Her name was Claire, and Adrian had never known her well. They had shared holidays, polite conversations, the occasional guarded family dinner. Nothing intimate, nothing hostile either. But when she saw him, relief crossed her face so suddenly it almost looked like pain. Thank you for coming, she said, voice rough with exhaustion. How is she? Adrian asked. Claire looked toward the elevators before answering. Still serious. Internal injuries, rib fractures, lung trauma. They're watching for complications. Is she conscious? On and off. Medication keeps pulling her under. Adrian nodded once. No dramatic reaction, no visible panic. But by the time the elevator doors opened on the critical care floor, his body had already gone rigid. The woman in the hospital bed barely resembled the one who had stood in the doorway of the lodge weeks earlier. Bruising along the jaw, one side of her face swollen, a cast on her left arm, bandaging beneath the hospital gown, machines doing quiet work all around her. For a second, he just stood there. Not because he didn't know what to do, because the mind always needs a second to place catastrophe inside human form. Then he walked to the chair beside the bed and sat. Her right hand rested open against the blanket, pale and still. After a moment's hesitation, he touched 2 fingers lightly to her wrist. Her eyelid fluttered, then opened. Recognition came slowly through sedation, but it came. Adrian, she whispered. He leaned slightly closer. I'm here. A weak, tired exhale passed for a laugh. Didn't think you would. I almost didn't. The honesty seemed to please her. Still honest, she murmured. He didn't answer that. He stayed for most of the afternoon, speaking little, letting the silence do what words could not. Nurses came and went. A physician updated the family in clipped medical language. Claire cried once in the hallway and apologized for it, which made no sense, but Adrian understood anyway. Near evening, he stepped out to find coffee and Claire intercepted him near the waiting area. I need to ask you something, she said. His expression was steady. If this is about me staying longer, don't. She stared at him. You always were direct. It saves time. Claire folded her arms. She keeps asking if you're leaving. I am. She could have died. She still might. The words landed harder because he said them without cruelty. Just fact. Claire looked at him for a long moment, anger and exhaustion competing on her face. You really changed. Yes. Into what? Adrian thought about that before answering. Someone who stops confusing love with obligation. That silenced her. When he returned to the room, Marissa was awake again, watching the doorway with the alert stillness of someone who already knew the answer before asking the question. Tomorrow? She said. He pulled the chair closer and sat. Early. She nodded once, the movement slight and careful. That's fair. Is it? She held his gaze. Yes. There was no self-pity in her voice now. No bargaining either, just recognition. You built something else, she said. I can see it even from here. I built a life that doesn't depend on being lied to. She absorbed the blow without flinching. I know. A few seconds passed. I am sorry, she said, and this time it sounded different from before. Less like confession, more like final accounting. Not in the vague way people say it when they want to feel better. I mean, I understand the cost now. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her. Not the past version, not the betrayer, not the woman he once built plans around, just the damaged human being in front of him. I know you do, he said. Her breathing shifted, shallow with pain. In the drawer, she said after a moment. Top one. He opened it. Inside was a flat envelope with his name written in her handwriting. He almost left it there. What is it? Something I meant to give you before the accident. He slid it into his coat pocket unopened. You can throw it away if you want. I'll decide later. A faint smile touched the uninjured side of her mouth. That sounds like you. He stood then. She saw it immediately. This is goodbye. It wasn't a question. Yes. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. That, more than anything, made the moment harder. Thank you for coming anyway, she said. Adrian stood beside the bed for one last second, suspended between history and distance. Then he answered with the only truth left. I didn't come back because I still belonged here. She waited. I came back because some endings should be witnessed. A tear slid quietly toward her temple. She closed her eyes. I understand. This time he believed her. He left without looking back. Not because he was trying to be cold, because turning around would have changed nothing. That night, alone in a quiet airport hotel, Adrian finally opened the envelope. Inside was not a plea, not a love letter, not some dramatic last confession. It was a transfer packet for a small writing cabin in northern Wisconsin near the state line, purchased months earlier under a business entity Marissa had controlled. Remote, modest, useful. A short note was clipped to the first page. I bought this when I still imagined I might one day make amends in some practical way. Not to undo anything. Nothing can. But to offer something that belonged to your future, not mine. Do what you want with it. Keep it, sell it, ignore it. I won't ask. Adrian read the note twice, then set it down. The property itself was not the point. The point was that for the first time she had given something without trying to direct the outcome. No emotional leverage, no conditions. Just release. He slept badly, but he slept. At dawn, he boarded the return flight without contacting Claire and without going back to the hospital. A second goodbye would only have served guilt, not meaning. Elena met him at the small regional airport in her truck, one elbow resting casually out the window like she had done this 100 times before. Everything handled? She asked once his bag hit the back seat. Enough of it. She glanced at him as she pulled onto the road. You look different. Tired. Not just tired. He watched the winter trees slip by outside. Clearer. That seemed to satisfy her. Halfway back, she mentioned an opening at a wilderness emergency training program further north. Better pay, more responsibility, more aligned with what he already did well. Adrian listened without answering immediately. It was a good offer, a forward-looking one. That mattered. You interested? Elena asked. He thought of the hospital room, the envelope in his bag, the old life that no longer felt like a doorway, only a place he had once survived. Yes, he said. I think I am. Elena smiled, small and real. I was hoping you'd say that. The next weeks moved quietly. Claire sent one brief message. Marissa was out of immediate danger. Recovery would be long, uncertain, but possible. Adrian read it once and put the phone down. He did not reply. Not out of spite, out of completion. A few days later, he reviewed the property papers again and decided to accept the transfer. Not as sentiment. Not as reconciliation, simply as an asset that now belonged to him to use, keep, or liquidate on his own terms. Choice mattered. That was the difference now. Not long after, he accepted the new position. More fieldwork, more responsibility. A life built from skill rather than escape. One evening, after a late training session, he and Elena climbed a ridge overlooking the frozen water just beyond the tree line. The sky had started turning bronze at the edges, the kind of winter sunset that made everything look briefly unreal. They stood side by side in the cold. No performance, no forced intimacy. Just quiet. Do you know what you're doing now? Elena asked after a while. Adrian looked out across the darkening horizon. More than I used to. Is that enough? He considered that, then nodded. It's a start. She turned to look at him. And the rest? He exhaled slowly, watching the air disappear. The rest I build on purpose. That answer seemed to settle something between them. Not a promise. Not yet. But possibility. As the last light thinned across the snow, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt when he first disappeared, and not even when he first rebuilt himself. Not relief, not victory, ownership. He had once left his life because it had become unlivable. Now he was choosing his next one because it was finally his. And that was enough. More than enough. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place, and subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.